beginning transmission of Music Bizz Radio. Thank you for listening. Here is your host, David Richards.
Hello and welcome to Music Bizz Radio. I'm your host, David Richards. We have another great episode for you today with jazz trumpeter Jeremy Pelt. We'll be talking to him about his new CD and his career and the state of jazz music today. I'll also be doing a review on the Harrelson trumpet, and from Harrelson Trumpets, Jason Harrelson will be joining us. Our CD release featured artist of the week will be jazz drummer Steve Johns, and you'll be hearing his album Family throughout the show. We also have another special In the Shed, as well as Facebook Follies. Before we get started, I'd like to remind you, please go to our website, which is musicbizzradio.com, where you can find all the links and ways to listen to the show. Okay, our first guest today on Music Bizz Radio is a very special one. He's a known jazz trumpeter. He's been compared to many, many players, including Lee Morgan and Freddie Hubbard. He currently has a new CD, Tales, Musings, and Other Reveries on High Note Records. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Jeremy Pelt. Hi, Jeremy.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm all right. You know, just ripping and running like we usually do.
How's the world of music treating you?
Well, as long as I get a chance to play it, it's treating me rather well.
So you just came back from Europe?
Yeah, not too long ago.
Cool. So tell us a little bit about this new record.
The new record, which, as you mentioned, was called Tales, Musings, and Other Reveries, is it's kind of a project that I've wanted to do for some time. It's kind of the catalyst is two drummers, which in this record is Victor Lewis and Billy Drummond, and it's not the kind of record that most people, including my label, initially thought that it would be, which is just a tour de force kind of drum heavy type of just nonstop hitting kind of record. More so, there are a couple tracks that are like that, but more so it's about communication amongst everybody in the band, really, and how we each react off to one another, which seems kind of, I guess, silly to say, since all improvised music should be that way. But I think I'd like to highlight it more in the fact that there are two drummers on there, and that it's not one of those things where everybody's just going for self.
Right. And, you know, when I hear you play and just kind of thinking about your style and stuff, you seem a little bit more old school to me, you know? Like, even though some of your music's progressive and you have good things going, I just kind of get like you might be kind of more the old school type of guy. Is that true?
Well, it depends on what you mean by old school.
Well, certainly in how you address social media, because you have a pretty good presence on social media. You're pretty interactive with that. We talked to Arturo Sandoval too. He's actually very active on that, but you seem to be like pretty in touch with what's going on out there in the scene and everything.
Oh, well, I try to be. I mean, it's the scene has changed a lot, and if you're not a part of that change, or at least willing to be open-minded to embrace it, and also in a certain type of point chase it, then you're going to be really left in the dust, because it's not waiting for anybody, and it's not moving in retrograde. So, you know, I think as apprehensive as a lot of people are to the idea of social media, it's still something that is that has to be addressed, especially if one is kind of minding their own career and what they do, because a lot of people are now turning just to social media. You know, I mean, you could have a website, you could spend thousands of dollars on your website, whereas most people will still want to see your presence on Facebook or on Soundcloud or on Twitter.
Yeah, I think
which is free.
Right. Well, exactly. Well, I think a website now has kind of become almost the business card and a place to put basic info, and then like the social media is to kind of be your proactive thing where, you know, new eyes are going to see it automatically.
Right.
Right. And so I happen to be your Facebook friend, so I see a lot of really cool and funny posts that you put, you know, when you're traveling and you're doing your stuff, and it's pretty entertaining, actually.
Yeah. You're not trying to keep it light.
Yeah, it's light. It is light. And not everybody's light out there. There's a lot of, you know, musicians that kind of engage in some pretty heavy political stuff that's going on out there. And, I mean, and I think that can be okay. It depends on what you're using the platform for. And I mean, it seems to me like, you know, you do a pretty healthy balance of, you know, just promoting your music and kind of what you're doing, letting people know where you're at.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I have no problem with that type of thing as well. I think it's more, you know, I just pick and choose my battles and really what I want to talk about in my platforms, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think people have become kind of hypersensitive on social media, and you kind of have to tread lightly, you know, but you try to be real at the same time.
That's the problem with it. That's why you have to kind of edit yourself in the most annoying of ways, because I feel like people are more sensitive on social media than they are in person. Exactly. You know, it's like you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm and you see, you know, how Larry David reacts to some things, and you think, and you look at it as, you know, being blown out of proportion, and that's a comedy, you know, but I feel like people have that setting when they're on social media where it's just, you know, it's almost for show. That they you know, react in certain types of ways. Whereas if you're in front of somebody and you pose something that is that's contrary to what somebody else believes, you could actually have a conversation without, you know, saying you're not my friend anymore.
Right. Exactly. Oh, that's a good conversation. All right, you're not my friend. See you later.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's become kind of a weird deal, man. I'm just you know, but you seem like a real down-to-earth, cool guy, like that has a good sense of humor. And basically, if people don't get the humor, then, you know, then don't deal with it. That seems like
it is what it is.
Exactly,
yeah.
Exactly. So, like I said, I just really, I get a kick out of this stuff. And, you know, when I talk about old school too, you know, one of the things that's happening, you know, there's kind of some statements being made. Like the jazz scene, and jazz is such a broad word, of course, but the jazz scene seems to be being pulled in a lot of directions. I think there's still a lot of guys that are, you know, kind of part of the old guard, and they're paying respect to what's been, but they're still trying to make progressive things out there. And there's some that are bringing kind of some of the other cultural stuff that's going on, a little mixture of hip hop and things like that, kind of like bleeding over into jazz. What would you say is where do you stand? Where do you think jazz is right now?
I think jazz is as vibrant as it ever was. You know, I'm actually one of the most, I guess, positive people that I know about where jazz stands. You know, I feel like there are people that really not musicians. Well, actually, a lot more musicians nowadays, which is a sad thing. But I mean, there are people that have certain jobs to do, and those people are usually writers and critics that, you know, basically position themselves to say what's hot and what's relevant and what's not. And those people influence the masses, and you know, that is nothing new, but what kind of sucks about today is that some musicians get sucked into that.
Right.
And they start, you know, believing their own hype. But that's the bad side of it. The good side is that, you know, people are very creative, and cats are out there doing their thing, and no matter what it is that you're into, if you're into, you know, quote-unquote hip-hop jazz, then you got that. If you're into straight ahead, you've got that. If you're into odd meters, you've got that. There's a lot of creativity happening, and as long as that's happening within the music, no matter where your ear bends, it's ultimately a good thing.
Yeah, and I agree. I think there's definitely, it's all about self-expression. We all have our thing. And then I guess, but I think what happens in our style of playing and the things that we put out there is kind of reflects our personal taste and kind of what we like, and goes that way. And then sometimes we get pulled into another direction to do some other ways of creating, which I think is good.
Well, the way that I look at it is the longer you're in music, and if you're following even the history of music with the masters, I mean, everybody changed, and you're supposed to change.
Right.
That's what it's supposed to be. Everybody, change. I don't ever want to get to a point where it's the jazz that I'm playing is like a museum piece.
Right.
And I think that's kind of like the Rage Against the Machine, quote unquote, not the band, but the rage amongst the younger generation of people that come up there is, everybody wants to experiment with different things, and that's the beautiful thing about it. That truly is, because, I mean, there's an obvious, and perhaps by old school, you might also mean that there's an obvious trace in the lineage in my playing and composing and whatnot,
right,
that tips its hats to the Miles Davises and the Freddie Hepburns and then Lee Morgans of old. But I don't want it to get to a point. I don't think that jazz should be looked at in that lens where everything is a direct tribute to any of those people.
Right.
I think just playing your music and learning and using those influences is as good of a tribute as you need to do. But I mean, obviously there's some places that won't be mentioned now that, like to really capitalize on the music of this, the music of this person, the music of that person.
Right.
And it's not a bad thing. I don't think it's the death of jazz necessarily, but I think that it doesn't move as fast as it kind of delays what is happening now in a certain type of way.
Right. Because
then now, just when you think that you're onto something that is fresh, then you have somebody doing this tribute again, and that's the major ticket.
Right. And, one of the things, as far as tribute, I think there's definitely a certain line of respect for the music that got us to this point. And not so much as saying tribute, but definitely if it's part of your style and it's things that have influenced you and you take pieces of that and use that to make new things. But at the same time, I don't think it's a bad thing to have those older influences still be kind of a part of the foundation of the music.
Oh, absolutely not. Absolutely not. And you need those.
Right.
I just don't think that it's something that needs to be exploited to a most obvious effect.
Right. Well, one of the things that you do really well is, and this is part of the creativity as far as I'm concerned, is you seem to dress pretty well. You have when I say you kind of have like an old school flair for that, and I personally kind of like that. That's my thing. And there was recently some conversation in social media a little bit that got a little bit heated. Not heated, but people are pretty passionate about. And you're not an old guy. I mean, you're in your 30s.
Yeah.
But you still seem to kind of, have a good influence of, that foundation we talked about. But there was a little bit of discussion about some people doing gigs and wearing tennis shoes and T-shirts and kind of trying to be a little bit more relaxed with the scene. How do you feel about that? I'm not trying to make anybody upset, but
I feel that's like I said in that post. I think you might be alluding to the post that a question that our friend Warren Wolf made about that this topic and just seeing everybody's reactions. I mean, one of the things that I said, I remember getting an email of like a photograph of what Thelonious Monk, like kind of like the 12 commandments or the 10 commandments of jazz. And one of the things he said was how to dress. He said how to dress sharp as possible. And the thing is this,
yep.
I always feel like people see you before they hear you. And one of the most positive aspects that jazz has brought is a sense of flair, a sense of fashion, and individualism within that. And I don't think that should ever go away. You know what I mean? I think that there's, music, even the music aside, I think that that's a positive stigmatism. I feel like when people come to see you and you're dressed up in a certain type of way, that just puts your best foot forward. I never believed, and there's times, I mean, look, at this point, in the past 20 years, jeans have become more acceptable. I certainly have been known to wear jeans on the gigs, but it's always, they're not baggy jeans, and it's always jeans with a sports coat and a button-down shirt and a tie and shoes, and wingtip shoes or whatever, just good shoes. And even with that said, for me, it becomes, what day of the week am I doing that? If it's a Sunday, it's the last day of the engagement, that's when I wear it. Certainly not on a Friday or Saturday.
Right.
So I have these little guidelines that I go through in my own head, but in general, I feel like any opportunity that I'm on the stage and people are coming to see me, I want to look like the best person in the room. And especially, people come and spend, people come and see you and they're paying $35 a ticket, and that's a night for some people.
Right.
Somebody goes out there, they want to impress a date, so they take a date to a jazz club, and there's food and there's drinks there. So I mean, you're looking at spending, and these days you're looking at spending like $150.
Oh yeah.
On an evening with you and your partner, and you want to look, and you want to be someplace where the people that you're going to see look like they respect themselves.
Right. And I mean, I guess I had actually participated in that post. I guess the thing that I had said was, if you're playing, a gig at you want these club owners and these guys to respect you and pay you like you should be paid. I mean, if you're coming up to show up and have a business meeting and asking for a check, you're not going to come in a ratty T-shirt you slept in all night. I mean, that's my only thing. I don't really have any particular, I'm not trying to pin it on any kind of cultural thing or anything like that. I mean, I just think there's definitely a place for that. Yeah. And I think there's certain things that, it's okay for. And again, it's personal preference. I know some amazing players that are super great people, and they play really big gigs, and that's what they want. That's the vibe they want to put out there. And I'm not against people for that. It's just not my preference. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it more and more I look at it as like to each his own. But I mean, in any environment, I'm not going to necessarily conform to what is the standard now for that environment. I'm always going to go for what I know.
Exactly.
I've been to some place. I remember doing a gig in San Diego a couple years ago, and there's a friend of mine from college that called me, and he was doing a Valentine's Day show, and so he flew me out and paid me my money, and we did this gig. It was a special gig for him, and he's a vocalist, and I was a special guest with the all California rhythm section, San Diego rhythm section,
right.
And of course I showed up dressed to the nines. And, I'm looking at the bass player and the drummer and, and they're wearing like Hawaiian shirts.
Well, that's San Diego. I'm actually from San Diego, so I remember that stuff.
Well, I mean,
terrible.
It's just like, even so, it's just like, damn, and they're looking at me like, wow, yeah, you clean up nice. And it's like, I mean, this is a gig.
It's like, you think he looks good, you should hear him play. That's kind of like our trumpets,
You just have to. You got to look a certain type of way,
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's there was it's not a call out, but Braxton Cook, who's a super good kid, man. I played with him and hung with him a little bit, and he put a comment in there. He said, "Just be you, just do you," and I think that was his comment. And I think that's a fair statement. And like you said, at the end of the day, it's just kind of be yourself, but everybody has their preferences.
Right.
So anyway, so That's the social media section. We're talking to Jeremy Pelt, fantastic jazz trumpet player. And one of the things that is one of the signature parts of you is one thing that I really appreciate, and the thing that I really try to do as a player is you really have good tone. You have like the tone that you put out there seems to be a priority.
Yeah, it is. It is a priority. You know, the thing is, again, it kind of goes hand in hand with the question that you were asking about in terms of how to dress. The other, I guess, attractive thing about any instrumentalist is how he or she sounds on their instrument.
Right.
So, I mean, could you imagine if, you know, Freddie or Miles didn't have a good tone, or Art Farmer or Chet Baker? You know, I mean, these are some of those players that I just mentioned have some of the most beautiful tones ever exercised in the music. And that alone kind of helps to present their ideas in a much more pleasing way than otherwise. And so that's one of the lessons that I learned was definitely to make sure your tone is together. And so that's one thing that I try and work on every day. Not try, but that's one thing that I do make sure of, is having the tone together.
Yeah, and it definitely is together. And I think, you know, I'm not trying to be critical, but there's definitely a lot of guys out there that don't really stress that. And that's fine. But, I mean, again, personal preference. And I think the best compliment you can get as a player is not like the great runs that you played. You usually get compliments on the sound. I mean, that to me is what really, like, you know, for an audience member to connect and feel something special. You always have that one or two people in the audience that look at you like they've seen a ghost or something. And after, and that's the person after the show that says, "Wow, your sound is great." It's always that person. So,
yeah, it's definitely something that it has to be be worked on by everybody. Yeah,
absolutely. And speaking of that, we're going to actually have Jason Harrelson on later, and he makes the Harrelson trumpet. So you're playing a Harrelson trumpet.
I am.
And
I'm loving them. Yeah,
they're great. Yeah, I've been playing mine since 2009, and it just changed. It was a game changer for me. But
definitely,
I love it. It's a whole different thing. So you have one. You're playing this. It's a black trumpet. It's a midnight.
I've got the black trumpet, and I've got that one, and I've got a newer one. That's the gold trumpet.
Nice. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to be talking to him later in the show, and does a really nice job. So we really like that. So so excellent. All right. So if you want to check out Jeremy's stuff and all his information, you can go to jeremypelt.net online, and his new CD is Tales, Musings, and Other Reveries, and that's on High Note Records. And if you're lucky enough to friend him on Facebook, you will definitely be entertained. What do you have coming? Do you have any touring coming up?
So we're going. My band is going to be going to Rochester International Jazz Festival this Saturday. So we're doing that, and then the next Saturday we're playing at the Side Door Jazz Club in Old Lyme, Connecticut. And then after that, I'll be at the Iowa Jazz Festival with Ben Allison's group. Most of our heavy touring with my band won't be until the fall, and that'll be in Europe. So that's what I'm preparing for. But there's some things in town.
Very good. All right. Well, I really appreciate you being on, and it was good talking to you. And
well, thank you.
I think you're a great representative of the younger generation of guys that are coming up and keeping the music going. And certainly there's a bunch of others, but definitely cool to see that you've made this a career, man.
Well, thanks a lot, Dave.
All right. So that's Jeremy Pelt, and we thank you for being on. And we will be right back with more Music Biz Radio right after this.
All right.
Hi, this is Arturo Sandoval, and you're listening to Music Bizz Radio with David Richards.
It is now time for product reviews. Please stand by for another review in 3, 2, 1.
Hello and welcome back to Music Bizz Radio. I'm your host, David Richards. It's now time for our review segment of the show today, and I want to talk to you a little bit about the Harrelson trumpet. In 2009, I actually acquired a Harrelson trumpet, so I've been using it for quite a while. And I really have to say that it is definitely an amazing instrument. I did get a Art Summit and really enjoy it. I was really looking for something that could help me with my sound, with my tone. That's something that I really always strive for as a player. And I was really never happy with the horn that I kind of grew up with and had for so many years. But really great horn, and I really enjoy the fact that it lets you blow through it. The back pressure that horns would give me in the past always were a little bit of an annoyance for me. I didn't really like all that back pressure. I felt like the horn would not let me blow through it and, really fill it up. And ever since I got a Harrelson trumpet, I really feel much more free. It's just put me in a much better place. And on the line, we actually have Jason Harrelson, who is the founder and owner of Harrelson Trumpets. Hi, Jason. How are you?
I'm doing great, Dave. How are you?
Good. And where are you located? Where are you at now?
Well, we have our original shop in Minneapolis, and then we opened a second shop almost 2 years ago in Denver, Colorado.
Okay. So, yeah, basically I just was talking about the Harrelson that I've been playing for several years, and of course I have nothing but good things to say about it. And it's been just awesome. It's been a life changer and everything, and it's really, if you haven't played the horn, it's definitely worth your while trying one. And, I was at ITG with you 2 years ago and got to show some horns and talk to a lot of players, and the feedback was really great.
Yeah, well, the conferences are always a lot of fun. I was glad you could join us that year.
So I have a custom horn. You have a variety of horns.
We do. Yeah, your horn is a Summit Art, and the Summit line is pretty much the most popular because it offers the most options in what I think is a really affordable price range.
Yeah, and it just plays. I mean, it looks great, but it plays fantastically. And, one of the things that I like to talk about when I talk about the horn, for me, it's one of the differences when I switched over and I was playing a Bach was the fact that it lets you blow through a lot better. There's a less back pressure pushing back, fighting the horn. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Sure. The key to finding the amount of back pressure is really in the interview and working with each customer. So, when you and I first connected, if you remember, I asked you a lot of specific questions. And from that, I designed some parts of the instrument really specific to you. And, those components are really the mouthpiece gap and the venturi and the lead pipe taper. And on our new VPS variable performance system that we have in the Summit line, we build horns with the lead pipe that you want, but then you can adjust all those variables like airflow and flexibility and slotting just with an insert inside the receiver. So our receivers just unscrew, and you can change the insert to any size to fit your playing preferences. But before that, like when you ordered your horn, I had to specifically build the horn to fit your preferences.
Yeah, and definitely it just felt perfect when we talked about everything and we did some testing and played a number of horns, and definitely feels like mine from the minute that I played it. There wasn't really a big adjustment period for me because it's kind of what I felt comfortable playing and really enjoy it. I mean, it's great. Like I say, it definitely changed my life, and love the horn to death. So you have a number of players playing your horns these days.
I do. we build as many horns as is physically possible, because there's always more people that want them than I can build, because I build everything myself. But yeah, we've got a lot of really well-known players, and some that aren't as well-known but are gigging. Some of them are gigging 4 or 5 nights a week and have been for years, even though you don't even know their names.
And you have you actually have, I mean, because some people tend to associate some of the art horns and things with jazz players and things like that, but you have quite a few classical players playing the horns as well. We
do. We have former members of the Boston Symphony, the LA Philharmonic, Philadelphia Orchestra, and orchestras all over the world playing our horns, and some of them are decorated with artwork, others with more standard. One of the members in the Metropolitan Opera owns 2 of our horns and plays them regularly in the section. So, yeah, orchestral players really enjoy the horns just as much as the jazz players.
And you're a trumpet player yourself. So what made you wake up one day and say, you know what, I think I'm going to just build a trumpet? Why and how would you have that thought?
Oh, that's a great question, and it's really the basis for the entire, my last 20-some years. What happened was I became obsessed with trumpet when I was young, but later than most people. So when I was a junior in high school, my band director basically kicked me in the pants and got me motivated to practice. And after practicing just for 1 week, I placed first chair, and I was addicted. I wanted to pursue it. The problem was I got into it so fast that I became a pressure player in 1 week because I was practicing too much. And it wasn't until college that I really understood that was a problem. So I started looking for solutions to make the horn play easier, as well as understanding how to play the horn, the physics side of it. And I went down the physics road, which is what all of my professors told me not to do. I found ways of explaining all the variables in, the aperture and the embouchure and the human side of it, as well as the physical side in the instrument. And then one thing led to another, and it became a business.
And you're very into the science of the horns and how they're designed and everything. It's very specific. It's not really like carving something out of a chunk of wood, that's for sure.
Right, yeah. A lot of people see the artistic side, and that is actually secondary. The physics of the instrument is the most important. So when I was in college, I studied acoustics and physics, and I did independent studies in the lab with an acoustician from Yamaha, and he was on a team redesigning the acoustic guitar for Yamaha to sound like a Martin. And I worked with him for, a year, really trying to understand the trumpet side of things and brass instruments. And that is what inspired me to build horns and drop out of school. So I actually left school and started building horns.
Well, that's one good reason to drop out.
Well, I wouldn't recommend it for everyone.
Right. It could have been worse, At least you weren't, you were doing something legal, as far as we know. Right. So, but the main thing, like, I get a lot of feedback. Of course, I have a Summit raw brass. I get 2 things. Usually it's from somebody that's not maybe a little bit older sitting in the audience, and after the show they said, wow, that is an old horn. How old is that horn? And I said, well, actually it was made in 2009. So I get that a lot. It's actually not that old because it's raw brass, and sometimes I let it lose its luster and sometimes I shine it up a little bit depending. But the other thing that I get before I even play is, wow, that is a cool looking horn. And I always say, well, you should hear it, because really it looks cool. It definitely looks cool, but the sound that you're able to get, and we just talked, we just talked to Jeremy about his horn. He's playing a Midnight Summit. Is that right?
He is. He's had, he has 2 horns. He has a 7 bell on one of them, and then he has a Summit Midnight with the number 8 bell. And the Summit Midnight is the horn that Jeremy plays pretty much all the time. And that horn is specifically designed to just produce a huge resonant sound that produces the fundamental on all the notes, whereas any other trumpet out there doesn't really produce the fundamental in the lower register.
And that's the thing. Like, I do notice that I can get that real dark sound when I need it, but I can make it bright too. I think it feels like you have more flexibility on getting different sounds out of it than I have with some of my horns in the past.
Well, and that's a lot of that's related to efficiency. If the horn isn't losing a lot of energy, then depending on what you put into it, you'll get more of that out.
And, in the upper register, I just feel like you can get a lot more air through. It's not fighting you. It's not pushing that back pressure back. And I think players have been playing for a long time. It might be a little shocking to their system at first, but when you do get used to it, it is absolutely upper register. They're just big and round and beautiful up there. Yeah,
well, they're designed to play in all registers. And for me personally, I test all the horns from pedal C to at least double high C. And if there's a problem in any of my designs, I definitely rework that. And I've done it long enough now that, honestly, every horn is guaranteed to have a double high C.
But the players aren't guaranteed. That's the only if they can do it. So
exactly, yeah.
so I think the workmanship, and you guys have quite a few videos and different things on HarrelsonTrumpets.com, and you guys have a Facebook page as well. But you guys have really grown. I think you did a lot of things. You do still do a lot of things by hand, but you have quite a bit of machinery, heavy-duty stuff. In fact, you're doing a Kickstarter campaign right now. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, we're launching our first Kickstarter campaign right around the first week of July, and that's to fund the purchase of some new CNC machinery. But to back up a second, you're right. We use a lot of high-tech machinery and software to model and design and build the instruments, but we still do a lot of handwork. So probably 50% of the process is still done by hand, using parts that have been machined and fabricated. And the new Kickstarter campaign is really cool because I created a new product that wouldn't sound new at first, but it's called Mini Bell. And Mini Bell is this small bell that you just plug your mouthpiece into. And for people who are into buzzing, it amplifies your buzz. But I'm not huge into buzzing. The reason I like Mini Bell is because there's an attachment, and you can add tubing at any length. And it's just clear acrylic tubing. And by doing that, you can create these really fun instruments in any key. So they're basically a miniature natural trumpet. And that Kickstarter campaign will launch here in a couple weeks. And you'll get to read more and see some videos and check that out.
And you guys have a great staff, Jennifer and everybody in there. You guys, if anybody that's ever dealt with your company knows that everybody's really, really good people, man. You have a lot of good people in the company.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Jen and Christine and James. There are actually two James, and now we have a new member in Denver, and that's Kate. And, really, there are only 5 of us doing all this work. So we really work with each individual, on a personal basis.
And so ordering a trumpet is pretty exciting. I think the most exciting part is when you get that in the mail and there it is and you first see the horn. I've got a lot of friends that have gotten the horns, and it's always a big, awesome experience. And you guys make great horns. Love it. I'm going to always love it. So.
Well, thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. We really have dedicated, I've dedicated my life to it, and we're all very dedicated to producing just the finest horns that meet your expectations or hopefully exceed them.
And obviously a lot of people like the art horns, but you do carry many horns that are not necessarily art-based, but still utilize the technology, and you can get those and order those at HarrelsonTrumpets.com.
That's right.
All right.
We offer something for everybody.
And then occasionally you'll do some YouTube broadcasts where you have people doing question and answer sessions. Those have been real good. I've participated in a couple of those.
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that. You can go to our YouTube channel, Harrelson Trumpets, and I do a segment known as Ask Jason, I also do interviews, just like the one we're doing, with other trumpet players and other people in the industry as well, and those are on YouTube as well.
Well, very good. Well, Jason, it's been a pleasure speaking with you again. And again, my trumpet, I love it. And everyone I know that plays one loves them. And you guys have definitely made a huge influence in the trumpet world out there.
Well, thanks, Dave. I appreciate that. And I'll always do my best.
All right. So again, you can go to harrelsontrumpets.com. That's harrelsontrumpets.com. They also have a YouTube channel. Check that out. And Jason, thanks so much for being on today, and I will talk to you soon.
All right. Thanks, Dave.
All right. Well, stay tuned. We will be right back with more Music Biz Radio right after this.
Hi, this is Tom Bones Malone, and you're listening to Music Biz Radio with David Richards.
So you want to be a musician? Well, maybe you had better get in the shed. Welcome to one of the most important parts of the show, In the Shed. This week, Jeremy Pelt tells you how to get that sweet tones you were looking for. I suggest you work on his technique if you want results.
Hi, this is Jeremy Pelt, and you're listening to In the Shed. One of the things that I like to do when I practice, which I feel like is very essential for brass players in particular, is to practice as quiet as possible. And by that, I'm really referring to your warm-up routine. To play as quiet as possible. Anybody instinctually can play loud, but the quieter that you can play, the more control you have over your instrument. And then that could translate to however loud that you want to play when you're warmed up.
That is pretty good advice, I would say. Thanks, Jeremy. Very fine advice indeed. Now people, get to practicing. It is part of being a good musician.
All right, welcome back to Music Biz Radio. I'm David Richards, and if you've been listening throughout the show, you've heard some pretty cool music going on. Our CD release featured artist of the week is Steve Johns, and we have him on right now. Hi, Steve.
Hi, Dave. How you doing? Thanks for having me on.
I'm doing great. Really enjoying the CD. It's a very, very cool. My type of stuff. Totally
Thank
dig
you.
it. Totally dig it.
Appreciate
Yeah.
that.
And I think everybody will enjoy it. It's actually off the CD Family.
That's correct.
And that has a very specific meaning.
Yes, it does. It does.
Go
Sure
ahead.
does.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, this CD actually got formulated. The idea of it came last summer. You know, Dave Stryker said, Steve, you know, you're on a lot of records and other people's records, and you have a band called Native Soul that I thought that's another band that I am a member of. And I've released those records. I've done co-records with one of my good pals, Peter Brainan, who plays with Arturo's O'Farrell's big band, and we made a record called No Saints, No Sinners, like 2002 with Eddie Henderson and George Cables, and that was a co-led record, Steve Johns, Peter Brainan, and then we formed a band called Native Soul, and we released 3 records under that. And so they said, well, Steve, you know, that's all good and everything, but, you know, you need to make your own CD, your very own. And it got my mind thinking about this. I said, you know, he's right. You know, I got to do my own record. So I got to thinking about it, and my son was going off to college and, you know, graduating from high school, and I said I wanted to. Daryl Johns, the bass player, who's really actually a rising bass star, actually, in the jazz world. He's going off to college, and I wanted to capture that time with my wife, Debbie Keefe Johns, who's a great tenor saxophone player, as a family, and we actually originally were going to just record it as a trio, just me, Debbie, and Daryl. And I said, let's augment it. I said, I never recorded. I've been buddies with Dave ever since we came to New York, back in the early 80s, like 82, 83. I met Dave. And we never recorded. I actually did a demo with him, one of his first demos with Brian Lynch and Jim Snydero and Jay Anderson many years ago. But we never actually recorded together. And I always felt like after Dave's done 30 records, that I got to do, I got to do one with my man. So I enlisted him. I called him up. I said, Dave, hey, do you want to play on this on my CD? You want to play this recording? And he agreed to do it. And so then I thought, well, let me see. I've been playing with Bob DeVoe on like 3 of his records, and I said, man, I got to have Bob on a few cuts on this record. And so I called Bob. I got him on it, and we went into the studio. And after we were recording, before we recorded, Dave said, look, let me produce this thing. I'll produce it. So we went in the studio, a fantastic studio out here in Paramus, New Jersey, called Trading Eights. Chris Sulit, who's actually cranking out like fantastic records. Like Dave's record was like number one, Jazz Week charts, and so we went in the studio and recorded it. I wasn't sure whether or not it was going to be an actual CD. We're just going to go in and just see what happens. We didn't have really a label. We didn't, have, anything really other than just going in and just trying to just capture this particular moment in time with my family before Daryl went off to college. So we recorded it, and it actually surprisingly came out very, very good. And so we proceeded to get talking with Dave about releasing it on his record, Strike Zone Records. And that's basically how it formulated, so the record was made.
It sounds great. And we're speaking with Steve Johns, drummer Steve Johns, and
Johns
with the CD family. And actually, so his son is the bass player, and I have to say, not too many bands actually make their bass player. So, the relationship, the relationship in the rhythm section between a bass player and a drummer, Steve being a drummer, is very, very important. So he went out and just made his own bass player, and it seems to have worked out really well. Quite, your son's a fantastic player, and you guys seem very locked in. It sounds great.
Oh yeah, me and Daryl, we have like a certain kind of, our beat is, I don't know. I guess it's that genetic connection, and I really do think that we play together. We play the best together.
Right.
He says, I really feel good about this. We don't agree on a lot of things. He's a teenager, but we agree on our beat.
Did you ever send him to his room when he didn't want to play a song that you wanted to play?
No, Daryl was always very willing and ready to play. This kid just, he's just. I never forced him to play or practice, or it was never something that me and Debbie pushed him. And it says that in the line notes. We didn't push Daryl into this at all, or to play a bass, or to play an instrument. It just, it was just kind of just natural for him, because we were all around musicians all the time. And, I worked with so many musicians, and one of them was Billy Taylor. And so I would bring Daryl, down to the Kennedy Center. We used to tape shows for NPR. And we had many guests on there. We'd bring Daryl down, and he would hang out with everybody. Or if I played a gig with Jimmy Heath out in Long Island, I would take him with me, and he would hang out with Jimmy Heath before he even played music. And so it just kind of he just came right into it. He's was born into this.
So he basically going to work with Daddy paid off.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think Daryl's not the only one. I mean, I think that kids that come from musical families, especially the parents of both musicians, they have a big.
Your wife Debbie's the sax player on the album.
That's right.
Yep.
That's right. We met at the New Conservatory of Music in Boston, but I'm from Boston, and I have to say, the family idea of the record actually goes further down, deeper than the roots of it, than just me and Debbie and Daryl. My uncle, my family on my mother's side was very musical. First of all, my late mother, Goldie Tyler Johns, who passed away a few years ago, sadly, was very nurturing to me as a musician. And she was a composer and wrote tunes, and she wrote tunes. She was a member of ASCAP, and she wrote tunes for Capitol Records. She wrote, that were recorded by Earl Bostic, did one of her tunes. And also a doo-wop band called The Five Keys also recorded my mom's tune, which I recorded on my No Thanks No Sinners record with Peter Brain and co-led. It's called Coach of My Lover, and you can actually find that tune on YouTube. It's actually the Five Keys playing my mother's song, singing my mother's song, Coach of My Lover, and I'm very proud of that. And also her brothers, all played like alto, or tenor. And one of my uncles was the late great Jimmy Tyler, who a lot of people aren't really that hip to him, but he was very important figure in the Boston jazz scene. In fact, he's featured in a chapter in Richard Vacca's Boston Jazz Chronicles. And it talks about him and leading a band at the Hi-Hat Club. And he had people such as Jackie Byard in his band. He had Danny Turner. Cat Anderson was in his band. And his best buddy was Paul Gonzalez from Duke Ellington Orchestra. They were the best of buddies. And they actually played tenor in the 1949 version of the Count Basie Orchestra. They both, he played first and second tenor. And they were on a couple of records, when the band was in its kind of transitional period between the Old Testament band and the New Testament band, before Paul Gonzalez actually went with Duke Ellington.
Wow.
He was with that band, and he also was with my uncle, so they were both, And I remember I grew up 141 Pembroke Street in Boston. That was my grandmother's house, and actually was my Uncle Jimmy's house. And, in that house, it was like 5 floors, 5 stories high, had rooms, like it was like almost a rooming, boarding house,
right,
in a way. And, it had like each room had like, bed and, bathroom on one floor and a hot plate, and people would stay in there, and musicians would stay in there. And everybody from like, Cat Anderson would stay there. Paul Gonzalez would stay upstairs, and I would come in the house and I would hear saxophones from way upstairs in the building. And I'm kid you not. There are stories that my cousin Skipper says. He's not a musician, but he says he's a lot older than me, but he remembers going in the kitchen and my uncle would be in there boiling up lobsters, and like Horace Silver would be sitting there and Yosef Latif in the kitchen eating lobsters and just hanging out and just having fun in the kitchen. And that was like no big deal. So I kind of, in a way, this family thing, it's deeper than just me, Debbie, and Daryl. It goes back to my parents and my mom and my brothers, and also my Uncle Robert, who is used to be the choral director at Burlington High School. He's also in the music business too. He plays piano and saxophones, but he had a radio show in Boston called it was the Storm radio show, Storm Trio, and they were on can't remember the name of the radio ID, but it was on in like the late 50s. You know, so they had a radio show in Boston. So, and also my uncle, Jimmy, this is something I've always known. When I was young, I was reading a Downbeat magazine. I was in 8th grade. And reading this story about a new drummer by the name of Steve Gadd, and I was reading this article, and it says, yeah, I started playing Atlantic City with Jimmy Tyler, you know. So, you know, Steve Gadd, as a teenager, used to go down to Atlantic City and play with my uncle's organ trio when he was, you know, in the early 60s, and when he was about, I guess, you know, 16, 17 years old. He used to call up Steve Gadd and ask him if he can come down and play, you know, and that's something me and Steve, when I see him once in a while, we talk about that, you know, and so that's kind of cool. I feel like I just kind of grew up in this world of music.
Well, the CD is great. We're speaking to Steve Johns, jazz drummer, and a little bit of a trumpet player. A little bit. We're hearing about that as well.
Yeah, that's something. That was my first instrument, and I know Dave, you're a wonderful trumpet player, and I actually like the Harrelson trumpet that new. That trumpet, is that what it's called, Harrelson?
Yep. We spoke to Jason earlier on the show today.
That's a fantastic. I haven't played one or saw one, but wow. And I think does Jeremy Pelt play one?
He actually does. Yes.
Yeah, I played with him about. I guess it was about maybe 8 months ago. He came down. He had a black Harrelson.
Yep. I think it's called like the Midnight or something. But,
Midnight, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I love the horn. It definitely changed my life 100%. So, and then
I got a Bach 43.
Oh,
now,
nice.
And
okay.
It's kind of a bear in a way. It's kind of hard to play.
Well, yeah. I mean, I played a 37 forever. I think everybody played a 37 back in the day. Yeah. But yeah.
Well, for me, it's kind of fun. It's a fun thing for me. I just do it as a hobby. You know, I mean, I have played. You know, I run a program here in Tenafly. JCC Turnour School of Music, Teen Town Jazz program that me and Debbie and I co-lead. And we've developed the program for two years now. And it's growing, and we have a big band, and we have small groups. And when I first came in there, we lacked in trumpet players. So, you know, I had studied with Laurie Frank like years before Daryl was born. I started practicing. I said, well, look, let me practice for a couple of weeks and try to get my chops up, see if I can maybe play a fourth part or something, you know. And I did. So I worked it up, and I wasn't planning on continuing. I just started doing it day by day by day and started getting better. And so I ended up doing it. It was kind of thrilling to do it, you know.
Well, that's very cool. Yeah. The world could definitely use more trumpet players.
Yeah, you know, I should actually practice bass because, you know, then I would maybe get like a little side gig or something, you know. But no, the trumpet's basically just a hobby for me. It's just something that it was my first instrument, and I like the discipline of it, and I think it helps me all around as a musician. I think it kind of focuses my drumming, and my drumming is kind of coming from, I don't know. My drumming is. I have a drumistic part of my playing, which is kind of chops orientated, but also I try to rely more on my ear and split-second timing, you know, of how I react to what's going on. And I think playing trumpet, and I play some piano too. I practice a lot of piano and trumpet. It kind of strengthens that I guess, you know, that part of my mind, you know, musically. So when I play with people, I kind of know what they're doing, and I can hear the subtleties in the music. So I guess maybe it kind of refines my drumming in a way. And
absolutely, I can see that.
I try to think as musical as possible, you know.
So the old saying, drummers are always late. So you would be on time if you played the trumpet. Is that?
Yeah, I guess I would. Yeah, because I don't have to carry all that stuff, you know.
That's the other thing. I play a lot of instruments, and I used to gig more on other instruments, but I stick to the trumpet now because you stick it on your shoulder put the mouthpiece in. You're done. You put it back in the case. Stick it on your show.
That's right.
See you guys.
That's
Have a
right.
good one. That's
Hey, but anyway, but about the record, it's my record family. The tunes on it. Every tune on the record. Like the first tune is called Sleepwalk, and I wrote that tune. I right like a few days before we were getting ready to record the record. When you get the juices flowing, and I came up with this vamp or this bluesy line that I write at the piano, and I came up with that line, the first part, and then I kind of made up a bridge that has like these rhythmical hits to it, and it's a little awkward with the form, but it works, and it's got a nice minor modal thing on it, and then So You Say it's the second track on the record, which was written by my good friend and the director of the jazz program at University of Massachusetts in Amherst, Jeff Holmes, who I recorded on his record of One Zone, which is on Miles High Records, and I'm very proud of that record, and he said he wanted to write a tune for my record last year. I said, yeah, sure, go on write a tune, Jeff. And so he came up with this tune. I love this tune, and it features Daryl on his Bodera bass, 5-string bass that he plays. He plays with Matt Garrison, 5-string, and he's an endorser with the company. And Jason DeSalvo out there brought Daryl on. We went out to the plant in Brooklyn, and they outfitted him with a setup, and the bass sounds beautiful on it. And Jeff wrote some really beautiful counter bass lines on that too. And then, I'm just going through the tunes here because they're all special programming. And Shadowboxing is a Dave Stryker original, and it's like an up-tempo burner. Dave said you got to have an up-tempo burner on this record, so he did that. And then the next tune is called Bogey and Bacall, which was the tune that I originally wrote as a little tune, it was supposed to be a little more up-tempo, but it fell into I brought it down into a ballad, and it actually kind of sounded like film noir, kind of black and white. And at around the time Lauren Bacall passed away last summer, I don't know if you recall, I started thinking about a title for the tune, and I said, she just passed away, and I really liked her, and I liked her and Humphrey Bogart and them together, and all the great movies they made, and I just, I'm a pretty big Humphrey Bogart fan because I love his movies, and like Dark Passage, and just, the whole romance between Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart was just really kind of endearing, and I just wrote this tune, and I called it Bogey Bacall, and, I think it really captures that feeling, and Dave plays a wonderful nylon string introduction on it, and just really it shows how great he is at playing the nylon string guitar, and it's just beautiful. I just think it was a gem. And then Can't Believe is a Dave Stryker original that he's recorded previously, but I like the way the vibe we get on it. It's kind of a swanky, kind of swung, funky thing, and Debbie plays really great on it, and Dave, they just kind of really get going on it. It's really, really nice, the vibe. And then mixing is Airto Moreira's tune, which one of my buddies, Ben Shear, came over and brought it to me as a guitar player, and we played it down. And it's in 7/4, and it's got kind of a fun thing to it, and it has a very cool kind of melody that fits over the 7. And I was always a fan of Airto, for years. I always loved his music and everything that he played on, like Light as a Feather and all this with Miles, and just really dug him. And DKJ is a tune, DKJ. Those are the 3 letters that of Debbie and Daryl share, because Daryl's name is Daryl, and his middle name's Keith, which is Debbie's maiden last name, and John, and her middle name. she's taken my last name, so it'll be Debbie Keith John. So they share that, and it's kind of a little tribute to them, and Shell Game is a Bob DeVoe original, which Bob wrote for me, and Bob's a wonderful guitar player, and I think that Dave and Bob really blend well. Although they don't play on the same tracks together, they play on separate tracks, but it gives the record a nice, I would say, contrast from one player to the next, and they kind of complement each other, and it makes the record kind of interesting in that way, And then the last tune, which is the funny one, it's Chunk. It's a tune that's called Chunk, and it's in a funny kind of configuration of time signatures. It's got 4 bars of 4 and 4 bars of 5, 8. 4 bars of 4 and 4 bars of 5, 8. And we kind of get a vamp going, me and Daryl, and we actually, if you go on YouTube, you can find it, Daryl and Steve Johns messing around with time signatures. And we play, me and Daryl, the vamp, and I solo over the 4/4 and the 5/8, and it was kind of a cool little bass line. So I had asked Jeff Holmes if he could write a line on top of it, like a melody, and he wrote this kind of like angular little mouthy kind of sounding, melody on top of that, and came out really, really nice. And then to top it off, we added this rubber. I just call it a rubber. Daryl brought back this rubber pig from Japan, and you can hear it on there. When we recorded the tracks, we had Daryl go in the studio into the little microphone and just overdub the pig. It makes a funny squeaky sound, and actually, the pig actually broke. Doesn't work anymore. It doesn't quite make any more sound. But if you listen to the record, you can hear it. And
I heard it.
Yeah, it's kind of Daryl kind of does a great job to kind of like throw it in there. So it's kind of a little quirky, kind of funny.
Well, Steve, really, really enjoyed the CD. We've really enjoyed listening to it on the show today. And I really like how the tracks, there's a dynamic library of tracks and a lot of different stuff on there, which you don't always hear on a jazz album. And you hear all the different influences and mixes, which I really enjoy. And we've really enjoyed having you. We're talking to Steve Johns, and he is our CD release featured artist of the week. And his new CD, Family, is available on stevejohnsjazz.com. You can pick that up, and we really enjoyed it. Steve, it's been really great talking to you.
Yeah, Dave, thanks so much for having me on. It's a real honor. And, I look forward to talking to you again. And you have a great show. And maybe we can get together sometime and play some trumpet duets.
That sounds great. Okay, Steve.
I don't know if I get hang with you. I can't.
It's not about hanging. It's just about exploring. So
exactly.
All right. Well, Steve, thanks so much. It's been great to have you. And we'll be right back with more Music Biz Radio right after this.
Facebook Follies is next. I hope that you haven't posted anything ridiculous or crazy. We may just use it now. There is video circulating of a band called Lucky Chops. They seem to be performing some rather odd music in the subway. At first glance, the baritone player looks like Justin Bieber. After further analysis, it is not. You be the judge.
Well, that's going to do it for another Music Biz Radio. I'd like to thank everybody that was on the show today. Jeremy Pelt, Jason Harrelson from Harrelson Trumpets, and Steve Johns. We hope you'll visit us on the web at musicbizradio.com and on Facebook at facebook.com/musicbizradio. Thanks for joining us, and we hope you join us every week.
Thank you for listening to this week's show. We hope that you enjoyed the program and will join us every week. For information on being a guest or just to contact us, please email us at trumpetdr@gmail.com. This now concludes our transmission.